From Washington, here is the news in VOA Special English. The United States Congress has approved a measure to avoid a combination of government spending cuts and tax increases for many Americans. President Obama says the plan is one step in a larger effort to strengthen the American economy. The president spoke Tuesday night, shortly after the House of Representatives approved the plan. It was passed earlier in the day by the Senate. The House of Representatives has planned 2 votes on disaster aid for the victims of Superstorm Sandy. The lawmakers came under strong criticism for ending their current session without approving the aid. New York Republican Congressman Peter King said the House will vote Friday on about $9 billion in aid, followed by another vote on January 15th. Both votes will come during the new Congress, which will be sworn in Thursday. Central African Republic President François Bozizé has dismissed his son as defense minister and fired the Army Chief of Staff. The dismissals came Wednesday after a series of victories by rebel forces. The announcement said Mr. Bozizé would take on the position of defense minister. A coalition of rebel groups known as Seleka captured several major towns and cities last month. The group is now less than 200 kilometers from the capital, Bangui. Earlier Wednesday, forces from a group of Central African nations created a conflict-free area between the capital and the rebel area of Sibut. Opposition activists say Syrian warplanes bombed a fuel station near Damascus Wednesday. Reports say the attack killed more than 20 people as they waited in line for fuel. Activists say the strike took place in an eastern area that is partly under rebel control. The opposition also says rebels are taking part in a fierce battle near a military airport in Idlib province. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says rebels launched the attack on the military airport. The group said Islamist militant groups are involved in the fighting. There was no immediate confirmation from the government. Doctors have officially released American Secretary of State Hillary Clinton from a New York hospital. Ms. Clinton has been recovering from a blood blockage in her head as a result of a fall at her home. She left New York Presbyterian Hospital by car Wednesday evening with her husband, former President Bill Clinton, and their daughter, Chelsea. Her doctors said Monday there is no brain damage and that they expect her to make a full recovery. Secretary Clinton entered the hospital Sunday for treatment of a blood clot. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has called for Burmese officials to stop any action that could harm civilians or cause more conflict in Kachin State. Mr. Ban's appeal came Wednesday. Hours earlier, the Burmese government had confirmed airstrikes this week against Kachin rebels near the Chinese border. A government spokesperson said that training jets were used against rebels to answer attacks by the Kachin Independence Organization. Some government officials had at first denied an air attack in rebel-held territory. But officials later said the Army used airstrikes to help regain a base. The Chechen rebels are the only major ethnic rebel group that has not reached a ceasefire with the government of President Thein Sein. Russian oil production last year reached the highest level since the breakup of the Soviet Union. Information from Russia's energy ministry in Moscow shows oil and gas production grew at least 1% last year to reach a new high of 10.4 million barrels a day. The current oil production rate is greater than that of Saudi Arabia, making Russia the world's biggest oil producer. A floating oil drilling device has broken free from the ship handling it in a storm near the remote American state of Alaska. The United States Coast Guard said the Shell oil rig broke free in high seas on New Year's Eve. The oil exploration device almost immediately hit the rocky coast of an island as winds reached more than 100 kilometers per hour. Crew members have been rescued. There was no immediate sign that oil was leaking. Native American and environmental groups have opposed the Shell Oil Company's efforts to explore for oil in Alaska's Arctic waters. In Canada, Native people blocked the transport of goods Wednesday on a railroad in Quebec province. The Native protesters let passenger trains pass through the blockade. The protest was a show of support for a Native woman who has refused food for 23 days. Therese Spence is a chief of the Attawapisak First Nation. She is protesting a Canadian government bill that Native people say weakens land rights and environmental safety. A budget law passed last month will reduce environmental measures meant to protect rivers and lakes. The new law will also make it easier to sell the traditional lands of Native groups. First Nation groups across Canada are planning protests this week. The Vice President of Venezuela says President Hugo Chavez is in a delicate condition after a cancer operation last month in Cuba. He gave little information about the president's condition. Vice President Nicolas Maduro said he visited Mr. Chavez twice in Cuba. Mr. Maduro spoke Tuesday on the Telesur network. Mr. Chavez is to be sworn in for a new 6-year term on January 10th. Venezuela's constitution requires a new presidential election in 30 days if the president dies or is declared unable to perform his duties. President Chavez was first diagnosed with cancer in 2011.